Hi, this is Chef Ranveer Brar and welcome to India in 21 Recipes. And the recipe that we're cooking today is delicious and special in a very Indian context. I'll tell you when we come back. Now when you say special in India, when it comes to food, special means a lot of almonds, a lot of cashews, a lot of dry fruits, and that's where the cue to today's dish was. Today we're going to make a Kaju Katli, or if I had to break it down for you, a cashew nut sweetmeat, right? For that you obviously need cashew nuts, and the trick is to have the cashew nuts chilled. What chilling does is it allows you to grind the cashew nuts for a long time without them losing oil. Normally, if you were to take warm or room temperature cashew nuts and grind it, they just leave the oil would separate. What you then get is cashew butter and cashew mass. You don't want that. That's why you freeze them, and once they're frozen, you can bite into a couple of them, but just a couple of them, because the proportions are going to go awry, right? After that, they just need to go into a blender and a fine powder needs to be made. The trick to this recipe, like any dessert recipe, is proportions. And when you talk about proportions, the proportions here are 2 is to 3/4 is to half. More on that later. Let's grind the cashew nuts. You know, the interesting thing about cashew nuts is that while the Portuguese got them to India from Brazil, but the Portuguese and the Brazilians and the South Americans did not know what to do with the cashew nut that was hanging below the fruit, right? They used to use the cashew apple to make alcohol, but the nuts were still a mystery. Till Goa showed the world how do you take out the nut from the cashew nut at the bottom of the apple. So literally, India gave the world its first cashew nut. All right, so remember I spoke to you about the proportions. I said 2 is to 3/4 is to half. Now 2 is 2 cups of cashew nuts. 3/4 is 3/4 cup of sugar, and half is half cup of water. Do not alter these ratios because you feel like, because you're going to end up with something that's diametrically opposite to what's going to be cooked now. The disclaimer's right there. Water goes first, half a cup. Now I'm using granulated sugar. You could use caster sugar or breakfast sugar if you want. Do not use icing sugar. Icing sugar has cornstarch in it, corn flour in it, and that gives a different consistency. It burns faster, sticks to the bottom. The result is going to be completely different. You know, there's this beautiful connection between sweets and festivals in India, and because it is the festive time, and if you had to do only one sweet, one dessert, one mithai, you would always do a Kaju Katli. And the reason I picked a Kaju Katli is because 1, it's easy to make. 2, it's truly rich, festive, and represents India and the festive spirit of India. And 3, it's special. Now a little bit of lemon in the sugar syrup cleans it up. This was an old trick. Earlier sugar wasn't as refined as it is these days. So shouldn't be a problem, but if you still think you want to clean the sugar up a little more, you could use lemon also, brings the impurities on top, cleans up the sugar syrup. Another option that a lot of people do is they add different flavored syrups here. For example, you could add rose syrup, right? Instead of the sugar syrup, cook the cashew nuts in the rose syrup and you have a rose Kaju Katli ready. You could also use a khas syrup, the green syrup, and then you have a khas Kaju Katli ready. You could make your own syrup. You could reduce orange juice with sugar and then drop your cashew paste in it or cashew powder in it, and you have an orange Kaju Katli ready. Yeah? This is a classic Kaju Katli that I'm making, but then the opportunities are endless. So are the festivals in India. Endless. I'm going to drop a little bit of rose water in it. Beautiful. So Katli, the word classically means diamond. So anything that's cut into a diamond shape is a Katli. And anything that's cut into a square shape is a laws. So when you hear Kaju Katli, Badam Katli, it means that the marzipan, almond or cashew marzipan is cut into a diamond shape. When you hear a laws, it means it's cut into a square shape. A laws is also called a barfi because it looks like an ice cube. Barf, right? Barf is ice. So the most common problem if you don't follow proportions is either the katli becomes too runny because there's too much water, or it becomes too hard to eat because you've overcooked the sugar because of less water, right? And that's why I took my time adding the rose syrup, because in this case I do not want my sugar to overcook. And this is the cashew paste. The trick is to give it time, let it soak. I know what a lot of you must be thinking. Saying, oh Ranveer, this is marzipan, right? Anybody who's sort of done even a short course in bakery knows of this is like almond marzipan. You take the almond paste, cook it in sugar syrup, and yes, this is marzipan. But I also want to tell you that the recorded history of marzipan is some 300 years old, and the recorded history of Kaju Katli is more than 550 years old. So the question is, who started this? Clearly not me. You got to give it time. You got to give it time for two reasons. One, if you don't give it time, the lumps will form. Two, if you don't give it time, the sugar won't cook, and it'll again be runny. When you're cooking it, it has to be on a slow to medium heat because the cashew nut starts getting color, and you don't want that. The trick here is to cook the sugar with the cashew nuts. You have not cooked the sugar a lot initially, because if you were to cook the sugar initially, what would probably happen is a lot of that sugar will not enter the cashew nut and make it moist enough. But if you have it too thin, that's another problem. Now at a stage where you're sure that the mixture is homogeneous and there are no more lumps, at this stage you could add ghee, clarified butter, to allow it to cook better. I'd say 2/3 of a tablespoon. Now ghee does two things. One, it allows you to cook it better, bhuno it better, and two, it adds the richness that's needed for any Indian mithai, especially in the festive season. If you're making it vegan, you could avoid ghee. If you're okay, you could add a little bit of coconut oil, virgin coconut oil. You could also add some coconut powder in it. So you have a coconut cashew katli in that case, which is absolutely and purely vegan. Otherwise, go for it. Put the ghee. That's the Punjabi speaking. You know, I like my katli a little nutty, so I slightly allow the cashews to toast. Another amazing addition to a katli is hazelnuts. You know, just replace 1/3 of your cashews with hazelnuts. Outstanding flavor. Another amazing addition, or actually topping on top of the katli, is when you're spreading it, put some chocolate spread, chocolate almond spread, chocolate hazelnut spread on top. You know, you should try this toasted cashew bit. I absolutely love it. Don't go after the color. We've been obsessed with white for far too long. This is fascinating. It's difficult to choose a favorite, especially when it comes to knives from my knife block. But this is definitely one of my favorites. The 15cm Victorinox, again, walnut wood handle. But the beauty of this knife is it's neither too big nor too small. The blade is just perfect for you to pick up and not have to worry about what if a big vegetable or a pumpkin comes in front of you, or what if you have to do some really delicate work. This works both ways. You know, it deals with bigger cuts and delicate stuff as well. I mean, I'm just chopping nuts here. I could have easily carved out a chicken in case of an emergency, or cut a pumpkin. So if there's one knife you gotta have, this one's one of my favorites. Beautiful piece of art, right? Actually, if you look at it, the dry fruits do make it special. Now you got to leave it either at room temperature for at least an hour, or cover it really well and put it in the fridge, only in case of emergencies. Because if you put it in the fridge, there's going to be condensation. It's going to get wetter, right? I'm going to leave it outside. I'm going to leave it outside for, I'd say, at least 45 minutes. You could leave it in an air-conditioned atmosphere, but ideally not in the fridge. If you have to do it in the fridge, cover it really well. Thank you. And while the Kaju Katli is setting, let's talk about how to sharpen a knife. It's very important to understand how to sharpen a knife. Now, the first thing you need to do is you need to have a honing steel for it, right? Sometimes in the industry we call this sharpening steel. Now, you need to put it straight perpendicular to the ground on a surface that is soft, or you can put a kitchen towel at the bottom. And then you need to keep your knife at a 20-degree angle, right? So if this is 90, this is 45, so this is ideally a 20-degree angle. So your knife needs to be at a 20-degree angle. It can't be like this. It cannot be at 45 degrees. An ideal sharpening is between 20 and 25. Now, once you're done here, always remember that the knife needs to go down and away from you. Down and away from you. Just for your safety, right? It needs to go down and away, down and away. Similarly here as well, it needs to go down and away, all right? You can also, with practice, turn it around and have the knife blade side up, but keep the 20-degree angle and pull it towards you. 10 times on each side. And that is how you sharpen a knife safely, and make sure you get the best from a Victorinox knives. And you know what? I hardly sharpen my knives because the quality of steel and the blade that's used, it requires the least maintenance. But if you have to, use this. And that is how you sharpen a knife. The shape that forms happens because of 1, cooked sugar, 2, the ghee that has gone into it. It sets at lower temperatures, and 3, obviously the cashew nuts, right? The sugar being the most critical part. And like I said, if you want to make that 10-day Ranveer Brar guarantee sort of a katli, don't worry about it. Cook your sugar well enough. And you can leave it at room temperature and nothing's going to happen. Let's measure it out. Let's see, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. The first cut goes down the center. If you think your knife's sticking, it probably is. Just keep a wet cloth to wipe your knife. That's the diamond shape that I was talking about. You can call them katli, or you can call them diamonds of festive goodness. So I'm going to just add a touch of icing sugar. Beautiful. Icing sugar obviously is optional. What is not optional is you not trying this recipe in this festive season. If there's one recipe that represents India and Indian festivals, it is Kaju Katli. Please do try it. Thank you very much, and stay tuned to India in 21 recipes. I'm going to be back with another iconic recipe from this iconic country called India.